Welcome to the Book of Mormon Evidence Podcast with host Rod Meldrum. This week's Come Follow Me supplemental study is Lesson 13, Enos-Words of Mormon. He works in me to do his will. Jonathan Neville is a lawyer, businessman, educator, and author who has written over 40 books, including both nonfiction and fiction. He has studied church history and the Book of Mormon for decades, but didn't begin publishing in the field until 2015. He has written over 10 books on these topics. Approaches these issues like the criminal prosecutor he once was. He pursues the evidence wherever it leads and doesn't simply assume anything or take anyone's word at face value. When it comes to church history, he follows the adage, trust but verify. That process of verifying has led to some important new discoveries that he finds to be faith-affirming and corroborate what Joseph Smith said and what the Book of Mormon teaches.
Welcome to another episode of our Come Follow Me series, supplemental material. And today, I'm really excited to have, again, probably most of you who have been following our research for a while already knows Jonathan Neville, but we are excited to have him back. He's been all over the place. In fact, I think you were saying you've been on 27 flights in about the last month and a half or so.
Yeah, about last 6 weeks. So, it's been a lot.
That's both for you and your wife. So, just really quickly, what are some of the countries you've been coming from?
In the last few weeks?
Yeah.
Well, we were in China, Laos, Cambodia. No, not Cambodia. Myanmar, Sri Lanka, Australia, New Zealand, Singapore, Bali, which is in Indonesia. And now Provo. Now we're in Provo for a few days.
Highland specifically, but okay.
Highland, yeah.
You bet. Well, we are grateful to have you back.
Glad to be here.
And also we're very grateful to have you back and coronavirus free.
That's right. We're all healthy and everyone else around here is coughing, but we're not.
Yeah, it's true, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Okay, so again, our assumption is that you've already studied the lesson manual for these lessons. These are considered to be supplemental material, and today we're going to be talking about the Words of Mormon. We've got some things that probably you have not heard before, unless you've heard Jonathan specifically talk about this. But these podcasts are actually going. We're having some really exciting things happen with the podcasts, and in fact, I've gotten emails and so forth from people from Europe and all over from Sweden and so forth. Who are watching these podcasts and or listening to them, and so this is pretty exciting.
It's great.
All right, so in the Words of Mormon, let's start off with a couple of quick things here. We all know, basically, and we've talked about this several times on the episodes so far, that essentially the Book of Mormon came from two different, sets of plates. Okay, right. We had the plates that were in the stone box, which were the plates that Mormon did most of the abridgment for and so forth, and then Moroni finished it off, and then they added their commentaries and so forth there. But there's an interesting part that I think that most people have not understood the possibilities of here in the very beginning part of the Words of Mormon. So far, what we've been studying up to this point is the essentially the small plates of Nephi,
right?
The part that was substituted, if you will, for the 116 pages that were lost.
Right.
And now we're about to go into the explanation as to, what, from this point forward, basically, here. And I wanted to start off by just reading a couple of quick things now. So those of you who are using the annotated edition of the Book of Mormon here, this is on page 135. And it says, and now I, Mormon, being about to deliver up the record which I have been making into the hands of my son Moroni. So this is Mormon who's writing this portion of it, obviously. He's going to deliver all this stuff into his hands of his son. He says, and then he talks about that he's witnessed almost the entire destruction of their people at this point in time. So then in verse 3 he says, and now I speak somewhat concerning that which I have written. For after I had made an abridgment of the plates of Nephi. So what plates were those?
Well, it would have been the Book of Lehi. It was what it was called.
The large plates of Nephi, basically.
Right. But his abridgment was the Book of Lehi.
Exactly. The book. They call it the Book of Lehi. Right. Down to the reign of this King Benjamin, of whom Amaleki spake, I searched among the records which had been delivered into my hands, which was all of them. He had the repository of records available to him. And he says, and I found these plates which contained this small account of the prophets from Jacob down to the reign of this king Benjamin, and also many of the words of Nephi. And the things which are upon these plates pleasing me because of the prophecies of the coming of Christ, and my fathers knowing that many of these have been fulfilled, yea, and I also know that as many of these things have been prophesied concerning us down to this day have been fulfilled, and as many as go beyond this day must surely come to pass. Wherefore I chose these things to finish my record upon them, which remainder of my record I shall take from the plates of Nephi, and I cannot write the 100th part of the things of my people. Mm-hmm. I think most of us over the course of time have thought that what happened is that as Mormon was going through his repository of records mm-hmm. and pulling out the information and then abridging those onto the plates,
right, that
he searched the room of records, basically, the repository of records, found the small plates of Nephi, and then took those plates and installed them into the
right.
3-ring binder
mm-hmm.
of his set of plates.
Right.
Why is that wrong? Because all of a sudden when you've done your research here, right. it totally changed my understanding of this whole thing.
That's right.
And I think you're about to see and have a major change of understanding of this too. Yeah. So tell us about this research.
Well, to begin with, the title page of the Book of Mormon was the last leaf of the plates, mm-hmm. and it describes what was in the plates. And it says there was an abridgment of the record of the Nephites, an abridgment of the record of the Jaredites, and then Moroni sealed it. Doesn't say anything about any original plates.
Yeah, so there's nothing about the small plates of Nephi.
Yeah, and what you were just reading from here was at the end of the small plates that were translated in Fayette, right? Mm-hmm. And so I don't know how much of this you've already covered in the podcast.
We haven't, so go ahead and just give us a quick overview.
Okay. Well, the Book of Mormon starts off with the last part that Joseph translated up in Fayette. And that was where he translated the small plates of Nephi, what we call the small plates of Nephi today. And those were original writings of Nephi and Jacob and the others that Mormon just mentioned here. And so none of those were mentioned in the title page.
Okay, let's put this into context that everybody can understand. So basically, from a historical standpoint, so Joseph Smith receives the plates.
Right.
He's getting all kinds of flack, and people are trying to get the plates from him there in Palmyra. Right. So take it from there.
Okay, well, first he went and got the plates out of the box that Moroni put in. He took them home, and then eventually, a few months later, he took them down to Harmony, Pennsylvania to begin the translation. And he said using the Urim and Thummim, he copied some of the characters and began translating them. But when he was down in Harmony, he had what he called later the original Book of Mormon, which were the 2 sets of abridgments, plus Moroni sealed it.
That was basically this.
That was, represented by that.
Represented by this, yes.
Okay.
Yes, okay.
All right.
So, this is all the stuff that came out of the stone box.
Right.
Okay.
And so, of course, Martin Harris was the first scribe who wrote down the 116 pages. Then those were lost. Oliver Cowdery came down in 1829. And Oliver Cowdery began with the Book of Mosiah, what we have today.
Okay, which is right after
after the Words of Mormon.
Yeah.
And so he and Joseph did the translation up through the end of the Book of Mormon. And we read about that in section 10, because when they got to the end, they considered retranslating the Book of Lehi that Martin Harris had lost, 116 pages. Mm-hmm. And that's why in section 10 the Lord said, no, don't go retranslate that. Instead, you have to translate the plates of Nephi. But they didn't have the plates of Nephi. That's the key to realize. So
the plates of Nephi were not like at the bottom of the...
They don't fit in there anywhere.
Yeah, exactly.
Because the last leaf was the title page.
And this is the one thing, when you first brought that up,
and
I was thinking to myself, you know what, that's right, because Nephi made his set of plates 1,000 years before Mormon was making his plates. What's the chances that they use the same exact dimensions of their plates, the same exact hole pattern, so he could just kind of drop those into the 3-ring binder?
Yeah, right.
Well, they didn't have that kind of standardization, obviously. So when he found the plates, and it says that he put them with his other records,
right?
We've just kind of all assumed
We assume
he put them
yeah,
inside the thing.
We assume that put them with means to attach,
Right.
and it doesn't. You can see a few verses later it talks about
That's
how
right.
these original records were also put with the records of the Nephites, but Mormon had to go searching for them.
Yeah.
So they weren't attached. They were just in the same area they put them with.
And none of the witnesses said anything about the plates
right.
having two different sizes or anything like that?
Well,
or?
yeah, they did.
Well, I mean, in the same three-ring binder.
Right, the same. Well, this is one of the issues that
Right.
gets back into the two sets of plates.
Yeah.
But let's first finish with chronology.
Yeah.
Because when Joseph and Oliver finished with the original plates, what I call the original Book of Mormon, which was the abridged Book of Mormon, he translated the title page, and he said it was a literal translation. It's the only thing he said was a literal translation. And the title page was like what we would consider a table of contents today, because it explained the purpose of the book and what it consisted of, which was the two abridgments.
It tells us exactly what it is. So.
Right. So before they left Harmony, well, one day, while they were in Harmony, Joseph applied the Urim and
Joseph
Thummim.
and Oliver Cowdery.
Joseph and Oliver Cowdery. Joseph applied the Urim and Thummim to his eyes to look on the record, according to his mother. And instead of having the words of the book given, he received a revelation to ask David Whitmer to come pick them up. He didn't even know David Whitmer. But Oliver Cowdery did. So Oliver Cowdery wrote a letter. He had written two other letters to David Whitmer, updating on the progress. And he asked David Whitmer to come and pick him up. And that's a famous story in church history where David Whitmer got the letter. He said, "It's hard, I'm planting, I can't come down." And the three Nephites plowed the land, and so he
plastered it and all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
So when they came down, before David Whitmer came down, Joseph Smith gave those plates to a divine messenger. That's all he called him. He said he was a divine messenger.
In
Harmony.
because he was there in Harmony. He needed to come up and find out what was going on with the 116 pages and so forth. At that point in time,
the 116 pages was the year before.
Okay.
He had he was finished with the plates. The only thing he had
was done
to
with the
translate,
translation.
the only thing he couldn't translate was the part that was sealed.
Right.
Because Moroni had told him, don't translate the part that's sealed.
Right.
But the rest of the plates he had finished translating. And that's why the Lord said, now you have to translate the plates of Nephi. So he had to get the plates of Nephi. So before he left Harmony, he gave the original Book of Mormon, those abridged plates, to this messenger. Then David Whitmer shows up. They get in the wagon. They're headed back to Fayette, and they pass this messenger on the road. And David Whitmer asked him if he wanted a ride, and the guy says, "No, I'm going to Cumorah."
It's kind of this odd little anecdotal story, and everybody's kind of wondering, what is this? Why
it doesn't
is this
make any
in church
sense,
history?
right? Yeah, it doesn't make sense. And so if you read some of the traditional historians, or what I call the revisionist historians today, they just completely
just
omitted that. They've censored it basically from church history. So the only way you can find it is to read the original.
Well, why do you think
records.
why would they censor something?
Well, that has to do with the Hill Cumorah problem.
Okay.
Because
we'll talk about that.
We'll talk about that later.
Things,
But the point was, so this messenger said he was going to Cumorah. And David Whitmer said he had a knapsack on his back, and it looked like it had something solid like a book. And he asked Joseph Smith who it was, and Joseph Smith said it was one of the Nephites. So he recognized him.
One of the three Nephites?
We just said one of the Nephites.
One of the Nephites, okay.
And so, but it was the guy that Joseph had given the plates to back in Harmony. And so this guy was
the same messenger.
Yeah, same messenger.
Okay.
So he was taking the original plates back to the Hill Cumorah. And so I started wondering, well, why would he do that? And that's when I realized, well, he was taking them back to the repository in the Hill Cumorah because Joseph didn't need them anymore. Joseph had to translate the plates of Nephi, which he didn't have. So this messenger went back to the Hill Cumorah, to the repository, left the abridged plates there, picked up, went through like Mormon did here, and found the plates of Nephi, took those over to Fayette. And that's why Joseph and Oliver translated the plates of Nephi in Fayette, not the abridged record in Fayette.
Right.
So getting back to this, so that's how we know there's two sets of plates. There's lots of other reasons in terms of the description of the plates,
just briefly on the description of the plates. So the three witnesses, it's interesting.
It's pretty cool.
Why did the Lord have two different sets of witnesses?
Well,
what were the three witnesses saying then?
Well, it was Martin Harris who said that only he, Joseph, David, and Oliver ever saw the original plates, the ones that they held in the stone or the wooden box that they had There's a red wooden box that Joseph stored the plates in.
Yeah.
Only the 3 witnesses and Joseph ever saw those.
And that's what basically is represented by this.
Yes, that's what that is. The 8 witnesses saw the plates of Nephi. And there's lots of ways we can tell that.
When they saw.
Well, they were in
were
Palmyra.
Okay, they were in Palmyra.
Yeah, at the Smith home.
Okay.
Because the Whitmer brothers went over to Palmyra and saw the small plates.
Okay.
So, and there's lots of details behind that we don't have time.
And they talk about plates that are not the same size. I mean, 6 inches by 6 inches by 8
well,
inches.
and Joseph's father, apparently, according to him, he weighed the plates on a scale and said they weighed 30 pounds. And other people said they weighed 60 pounds. And so this was always one of the discrepancies in the story that people were saying, well, this must be made up because these guys don't have their story straight. But it's perfectly clear that they had 2 different sets of plates that they were looking at and hefting.
So one was the large, well, not the large plates of Nephi.
The abridged plates.
The abridgments,
right.
This basically. And the other one was the small plates of Nephi,
right.
which Mormon said here, he searched in the record
right.
until he found the small plates of Nephi, and he put them with his other records, so they would have been probably, well, they talk about that there was a table inside the
repository,
repository records,
yep.
and that the sword of Laban was there.
And there were records piled high and all that.
But I'm guessing that when Moroni left and sealed up the repository records, that he left them where...
Well, he left all the records in there, yeah, sure.
Where the messenger would easily know and be able to find the small plates of Nephi.
Right, sure. And so when in this Words of Mormon, by the time he wrote the Words of Mormon, he had abridged the record of Nephi and Lehi, which was called the Book of Lehi until it was lost, 116 pages. And when he got to the end of that is when he found these smaller plates of Nephi. And so he says here, I found these, are pleasing unto me. And he says, I'm going to write the rest of my record upon these. Doesn't mean upon the plates, because they were the small plates were full. In fact, the previous writer said they ran out of room, right? So when he says he's going to write them upon these plates, he did not mean literally upon the plates that were already full. He meant he was going to write the rest of the abridgment to show how these prophecies have been fulfilled. So he kept it with it so he could refer to it, to these small plates, to show how the prophecies were fulfilled in doing the abridgment. Because he says right here, he said he can only write the 100th part of the things of his people. Yeah. He was choosing that 100th part based on what was in the small plates, so that he could show the fulfillment of all these prophecies.
Yeah. In addition to that, I think that he's also, as he's being directed by the Lord, because the Lord basically said, he said, Jesus Christ has shown you unto me, and I know you're doing.
Yeah.
So he saw us in our day and what was going on, and he knew what he needed to pull out of their history to put into the history that he's going to pass now down to us, so that we can learn from their
that's right.
mistakes.
But he used these small plates that he kept them with the record as he was abridging it, because he still had the whole rest of the abridgment to do.
Right.
But he kept them with it so he could refer to it and so on to make sure it was fulfilled. So that's what that means. And then just right after this, where he talks about putting them with, he mentions that King Benjamin had taken these same plates and put them with the other plates. So they weren't attached. Mormon had to go searching for them, but they were in the same room, in the same collection, you could say.
If we go here just to verse 6 and 7, let's just read that really quickly. So again, this is page 135. This is Words of Mormon. There's only one chapter, so it's just, I guess you'd say 1, verse 6. And behold, I shall take these small plates which contain these prophesyings and revelations, and put them with the remainder of my record. That's what you're talking about right there. For they are choice unto me, and I know that they will be choice unto my brethren. And I guess he's talking about the Lamanite, the future Lamanites. And I do this for a wise purpose. For thus it whispereth me according to the workings of the Spirit of the Lord which is in me. And now I do not know all things, but the Lord knoweth all things which are to come. Wherefore he worketh in me to do according to his will. I just love that. This for a wise purpose part. Because here he is, Well,
the way I think of this anyway is that Martin Harris wasn't predestined to lose 116 pages. He could have lost King Benjamin's address or something, or something else. No matter what was lost from the abridged record, the original was in the repository. because Mormon put it with it. And so it happened to be the 116 pages that the original plates of Nephi covered, but there wasn't an exact overlap either, which we could discuss it later.
Right.
But the point is that he knew that this was important for the future, but not because Martin Harris was predestined to lose these 116 pages.
Because he didn't apparently know.
Right.
Obviously he didn't know.
Well, we know there were other sacred records because Moroni himself went in and found his father's sermons and copied those as well. So there were lots of other things in this repository that they could have replaced if anything had been lost.
Yeah. So I wanted to bring this is from a BYU Studies Quarterly. It says, prior to the final battle of the Nephites at the Hill Cumorah in New York, this is on the top of page 135 in the annotated edition. Again, prior to the final battle of the Nephites at the Hill Cumorah in New York, Mormon had been abridging the records of the people of Nephi until he reached the point in Nephite history where King Benjamin ruled. He searched among the Nephite records and found a small account written by Nephi, Jacob, and other prophets down to the reign of King Benjamin. This account has been put with the other plates Mormon was working with, but Mormon still had to search for them. Today, these original writings are often referred to as the small plates of Nephi. These are the plates Joseph Smith translated in Fayette, New York. Mormon may have chosen the prophecies and the small plates to guide the remainder of his abridgment of the records of the Nephites to show how the prophecies they contained had been and would be fulfilled. And it goes on to talk about that some more. You can read the rest of that on that. But basically, it really is a wise purpose. I mean, you think about how brilliant was this.
Yeah.
And it was amazing that he was inspired to do this, so that even though we lost the more secular history of the Book of Lehi, we ended up having the more sacred history, which was in the small plates of Nephi.
Yep.
And these were all held in a repository of records.
Right.
Can you tell us a little bit more about this repository of records here? Because this is an important thing, and it's actually a place where there's some diverse ideas about this in the church.
Well, the simple answer is Oliver Cowdery described going in there and what it was like. He said the hill opened up. They went in on multiple occasions. They saw the room full of plates. Brigham Young and Heber C. Kimball and Wilford Woodruff and others talked about this. And
he's talking about when he says that you said the hill.
The Hill Cumorah, where Joseph got the plates. Okay. There were two. The way Orson Pratt described it is there were two separate departments in the Hill Cumorah. There was the department that had the repository with all the Nephite original records, and then there was the stone box that Moroni built to put the bridge plates, which I call the harmony plates, and the sword, or not the sword, but the breastplate and the Urim and Thummim.
Yeah, so we already talked about that the sword was not in the box.
Yeah, it was in the repository.
And neither was the Liahona.
That's right.
It was just the plates themselves and the breastplate and the Urim and Thummim.
Yeah. So I've had some people who believe the Hill Cumorah is in Mexico ask me, well, why would there be two rooms or two areas in the Hill Cumorah? Why didn't Moroni just have them go in the repository? And the easy answer to that is when you read Joseph Smith's history, it took him 4 years to overcome the temptation of selling artifacts.
Of just seeing this.
Just one set of plates, yeah. and that's when they ran into this messenger on the road from Harmony to Fayette. David Whitmer said when he turned to look at Joseph, in one account he said he was white, and the other he said he was pale. And people, well, that seems kind of strange, right? But if you think that that's the first time Joseph realized that all the records were in that same Hill Cumorah where he had been going all these years, he had no idea that all he saw was a stone box. Now he realized, based on what the messenger said, that there was $1 billion worth of gold in there, with all the other records. And that, at least in my opinion, that would be a shock to him.
That'd be a big aha moment for Joseph Smith, because he thought, I already got the whole thing, because it was right there.
Yeah.
And interesting also, he talks about, he says that he put basically this, essentially, on the Hill Cumorah.
Right.
And he said, but all the other records were in the Hill Cumorah.
Right.
The stone box, being just underneath a rock that was still visible from the surface, is not really in the hill.
Right.
It's on the hill.
Right.
But the repository of records would be in the hill, which would be actually. Yeah. And there's also interesting that people claim, well, some people said it was a cave, and some people said it was a room, and so forth. We now know more about that.
Yeah, do you want to talk about
it wasn't a cave because
it wasn't a cave, it was a room.
Yeah, number one, it can't be a cave because the hills in New York are glacial drumlins and so forth.
That's what some people say.
Yeah,
but there are caves in
they're more or less rubble piles and so forth.
But that's what a lot of people say, but I've dug into some of them and they're not that way. There's a surface layer that's kind of rubble, but underneath there's solid clay that's hard to even dig in. You can easily put a cave in there.
Yeah.
But it wouldn't be a natural cave.
Right. It'd be a room.
It'd be a room, a man-made room with brick walls, like the one we've seen pictures of.
And nowhere did they ever say this was a natural formation.
Right.
They said it was a room.
That's right. Well, they said it was a cave, but back then they used cave. They had a natural cave and a man-made cave, or artificial cave, they said. Yeah. But Oliver Cowdery talked about it, but as Brigham Young said, he didn't talk about it in public, in meeting, he said. But he told them about it privately, and they all knew about it.
Well, we have, is it 8 different accounts of people who went into, saw, participated in?
Well, it's all based on what Oliver Cowdery said.
Yeah.
But several people related what he said. And David Whitmer said that Oliver had told him about it. And David Whitmer also said the plates were no longer in that repository, but they were not far from there. And that's because...
Was that David Whitmer that said that?
David Whitmer said that because
But when did he say that?
I don't remember which.
Towards the end of his life, I thought it was.
Towards the end of his life, but it was when he was asked where the plates were now.
Like an interview he did for the newspaper, I think, or something.
Yeah, he did. Right. He did lots of interviews.
Yeah.
But he said that the adventurers from Rochester would never find the plates because they were down there digging up hills trying to find the treasure or the gold plates. And so, what I think happened is when Joseph Smith was going to publish the testimony of 8 people there, plus the 3 people, plus himself. So that's 12 people who testified to the reality of these plates. That was going to invigorate the treasure hunters to go dig up the hill. Mm-hmm. So he had to move the plates to another location, probably back to the Hill Shim where they came from in the first place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because there was 2 different places. They moved them from the Hill Shim to the Hill Cumorah right before Mormon and Moroni.
Yeah, and it's kind of cool. This is a little tangential, but it's kind of... People always ask, well, why would they go to this hill in New York, western New York? It's just, it's not that significant of a hill, right?
Yeah.
But Mormon knew that he had to remove the plates from the Hill Shim because the Lamanites were overrunning the land. And so he had to have known about the Jaredite fortress at the Hill Cumorah because of their last battles, which would be rooms inside the hill, as Oliver described it. So it's a natural place to move all the records to the Hill Cumorah. The other thing that I think is kind of cool to think about is how at the end of the Nephite battles there were only 24 men left, but Moroni is the only one who survived. So how would he have survived? And I think they hid him in the chamber, and they let the Lamanites kill the other 23 because they knew that they were survivors, but they would have had the hill surrounded. Mm-hmm. And so that's how I think Mormon survived. He didn't reveal himself, he says, in the scriptures, because he was in that chamber. He was hanging out in there until the Lamanites finally left. So that's another indication of how we know that there was a repository secreted in there. And the door lifted up off the hill. They could close it down and cover it with brush and stuff so it wouldn't be found. It's awesome. I mean, all this stuff makes perfect sense once you understand kind of that there were 2 sets of plates, why the messenger was taking these to the repository and so forth. The other aspect of Words of Mormon to touch on is that in verse 11 is where Mormon is sort of adding his little statement of sealing these small plates.
There.
We don't need to read it. Anybody can read it. It's verse 11. But starting with verse 12, it's a summary of King Benjamin. And as indicated here in the commentary in the annotated Book of Mormon, this appears to have been part of the original first 2 chapters of the Book of Mosiah, because what we have as Mosiah chapter 1 was originally chapter 3, and we think that the first 2 chapters, or most of the first 2 chapters, were lost with 116 pages. Mm-hmm. So we can refer to these verses 12 through 18. You can consider on page 117, for example, because in the Doctrine and Covenants, the Lord told Joseph Smith to translate the plates of Nephi up to the part that he had retained. So he had retained something. It didn't give all the
so
entire translation.
Apparently he must have given the 116 pages, didn't include everything that they had done up to that point.
Right.
It was just 116 pages. I know the 116 pages, though.
Yeah.
Anyway, there's something about the paper.
There is, it's real interesting.
Pages and so forth.
There's some different theories on why it was 116 pages. We don't have time to get into here, but
right.
it is a very interesting account. But it's an even number, and so if they had actually started on page 117, when Oliver Cowdery showed up, that part had already been translated. So that was the part that Joseph had retained, and then this part. It's possible that verse 12 is Joseph Smith's own insertion to make a transition to the actual page 117. But when you read it carefully, you can see it doesn't really fit with the rest of the Words of Mormon. So that's just a little side note. Pretty cool.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's cool.
That's fantastic. So there's a little bit some more in-depth information about the Words of Mormon.
Yeah.
And then just as a final thing here, again, you can read this on page 136, but this is from the preface of the 1830 edition of the Book of Mormon here. It says that as many false reports have been circulated respecting the Book of Mormon, and also many unlawful measures taken by evil designing persons to destroy me and also the work, I would inform you that I translated. That's an interesting statement. Yeah. He didn't say he didn't say that he read it off of a stone.
Right.
He says, by the gift and power of God, and caused to be written 116 pages, the which I took from the book of Lehi, which was an account abridged from the plates of Lehi, by the hand of Mormon, which said account some person or persons have stolen and kept from me, notwithstanding my utmost exertions to recover it again, and being commanded of the Lord that I should not translate the same over again, for Satan had put it into their hearts to tempt the Lord their God by altering the words that they did read contrary from that which I had translated and caused to be written. And if I should bring forth the same words again, or in other words, if I should translate the same over again, they would publish that which they had stolen, and Satan would stir up their hearts of this generation, that they might not receive this work. But behold, the Lord said unto me, I will not suffer that Satan shall accomplish his evil design in this thing. Therefore thou shalt translate from the plates of Nephi until ye come to that which ye have translated, which ye have retained. And behold, ye shall publish it as the record of Nephi, and thus I will confound those who have altered my words. I will not suffer that they shall destroy my work, yea, I will show unto them that my wisdom is greater than the cunning of the devil.
Yeah.
And just like you said, that's in Doctrine and Covenants, section 10. So that's a recap here. Mm-hmm. So there were two sets of plates. Mm-hmm. Go ahead and just.
Well, everybody knows that. Everybody talks about two sets of plates because there's the plates of Nephi and the abridged plates. Mm-hmm. The key is that, at least in my opinion, they were not in the stone box together. They weren't attached. They were two distinct ones, and that's why Joseph translated the plates of Mormon, the abridged plates, in Fayette, or Harmony, and the plates of Nephi in Fayette. That explains why they did that. That explains why there were different descriptions of the plates and the weights and what Martin Harris said and all that. So there's a lot of loose ends in church history that don't make sense until you understand there were two completely different sets of plates.
Right. Now there's a lot of things that we've talked about here today that we haven't shown any documentation for.
Right.
But if you'd like documentation, there is, and Jonathan has done an amazing job of this. There's a book that he has. It's called Whatever Happened to the Golden Plates. There's also a DVD that kind of goes along with that, Whatever Happened to the Golden Plates. And this gives you time frames and maps and all, and information that really helps to
it shows the sequence of how it all worked and so on.
And really, I mean, the work that's been done on this was pretty phenomenal. And you actually presented this to some church history.
Yeah, so, from time to time. Yeah. Well, for me, what's exciting about it is that it explains loose ends. Because when anti-Mormon critics, or let's just say critics of the church, who take shots at different things that happen in church history, and a lot of them have to do with the plates. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And for example, a lot of people say that Joseph Smith just couldn't retranslate it exactly, so he made up this story about the other plates, right? And there, when he pointed out here that the Lord said that if he did retranslate it, even if he retranslated it word for word, they would change the words when they published it.
Yeah.
It wasn't a matter of them going to the original manuscript and crossing out a word and writing a different word. That's not what it said. It said they would publish it differently. And so people would look at the published version. It was different from Joseph Smith's version, even though the original was word for word. And that's how Satan would deceive the people. So he had to do it this way. But when you understand the two sets of plates, it adds so much more reality and credibility to what Joseph and Oliver said all along. Mm-hmm. Because that's the physicality of having the messenger take the records from Harmony to the Hill Cumorah to Fayette, showing them to Mary Whitmer, which is a whole other topic to discuss.
Yeah, yes.
Because a lot of people are saying it was Moroni shape-shifted into this old, short, fat guy instead of the resurrected being that appeared to Joseph Smith. I mean, it's just unbelievable what they've come up with. But the reason they do this is
they're trying to accommodate.
They're trying to say Cumorah's not in New York, and so they're changing church history. They're reinterpreting what Joseph and Oliver taught very clearly to justify their opinion that the Hill Cumorah is somewhere in Mexico. And on the other, if you weren't trying to force the Mesoamerican thing into the church history, and you just look at church history, then it's obvious the Hill Cumorah is in New York. Yeah.
Yeah, that's an interesting aspect of it.
Yeah.
So we're going to have more of these. We have several more of these planned, and so we will look forward to seeing you on those. But actually, so if you like what you're hearing and you want to learn more about this, there's several different places you can go. You can get the book or the DVD. It's called Whatever Happened to the Golden Plates, and that's you can Google that, or you can get it on several different places. You can get on our website at bookofmormonevidence.org. Right. We have a bookstore there. If you'd like to hear more of Jonathan's amazing research, we're going to have several more things we need to talk about the Hill Cumorah, about we've got several different things. I want to make sure I don't miss something here.
Aspects of church history.
Yeah. Okay. But basically,
how the Book of Mormon describes North America is a good one.
Yeah, we want to talk about the smoking gun of the geography of the Book of Mormon, and also what is called Moroni's America. Yeah. That's this book here, which is a chapter by chapter breakdown of the geographical aspects of the Book of Mormon, and how that all fits here in North America, just beautifully. This book is called The Lost City of Zarahemla. This is a book that you did. That talks about, this is the smoking gun. Basically, a lot of people have wondered, well, so why is it that for years and years it seems like the church has promoted Central America, the Mayan civilization down in Central America, where did that whole idea come from? Because we don't have anything.
That's what we're going to talk about in the next one.
We're going to talk about that as well. Yep. And then there's we have a couple other books that he's done. There's a pocket edition of Moroni's America here. You have Letter 7, which is Oliver Cowdery's message to the world about the Hill Cumorah. We'll talk about that in more detail here. And then Moroni's Keys, and anyway, there's other great stuff. You've also spoken at least 2 or 3 times, usually at each of our bigger events that we've been doing. Mm-hmm. Those are now pretty much, I think most of them are up online. Cool. At Book of Mormon Evidence streaming. So if you want to see the full versions of these things, this is a very, very, very abbreviated conversation we're having here today. Right. But just to let you know that there is amazing information out there, and when Jonathan does these things, I mean, it's fully documented. It's really well researched and done. So thank you.
It's exciting.
Jonathan, appreciate
Happy to be here.
And stopping by for a little bit.
Happy to do it.
All right.
All right. Thanks, Rod.
Thank you for listening to the Book of Mormon Evidence Podcast. If you enjoyed this Come Follow Me supplemental study, click the like button or share it with your friends. Be sure to go to bookofmormonevidence.org, where you can buy tickets to the upcoming Firm Foundation Expo held Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, April 9th, 10th, and 11th.